Next up, we got the British, the British crusade against slavery. Now, a lot of you guys was telling me to react to this video, and really understand where slavery came from, because U.S. history does not explain everything into full detail, right? So you guys are saying, check this video out. All right, so this is a topic, but we are trying to understand and learn about history. So we're going to try to use as much open-mindedness as possible. All right, so hit the like button, hit that sub button.
Growing up, only one narrative of slavery was taught to me. Millions of black people were enslaved by white people in the transatlantic slave trade for hundreds of years. This is true, of course, but it would have been white people. Only one narrative of slavery was taught to me. Millions of black people were enslaved by white people in the transatlantic slave trade for hundreds of years. This is true, of course, but it would have been very helpful if nuances were included in this narrative. Slavery was not limited to a specific race or period of time, but rather an institution deeply ingrained in human society since the ancient times, and the effort to bring it to an end was exceptional and unparalleled in history. Today, we will begin exploring these nuances by exploring 3 uncomfortable truths about slavery. In the 16th to the 19th century, pirates from the Ottoman Empire would capture and enslave European people from European coastal areas. Yes, white people. They would then transport them to North Africa. This was known as the Barbary pirate slave trade, as this was carried out by North African pirates from the Barbary states, which included places in present-day Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and parts of Libya. The Barbary pirate slave trade emerged as early as the 9th century, when Arab forces began expanding into North Africa. Over time, various groups emerged and established independent states in the region, which later became known as the Barbary states. These states would engage in piracy as a means to accumulate wealth and power. The motivations were mainly economic. Capturing and enslaving people could provide a lucrative source of income, as slaves could be sold in markets or ransomed for large sums of money. The captured Europeans would be used as laborers, soldiers, or concubines within the Barbary states. Barbary pirates targeted European coastal areas and ships traveling in the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. They would launch surprise attacks marked by speed, violence, and brutality on unsuspecting victims. Coastal communities were pillaged, ships would be raided, often resulting in the massacre of crews and capture of the survivors.
I never knew that pirates was a real thing. I thought that was just like I don't know what I thought it was. But I guess pirates are a real thing. So they really was out here in ships, going place to place, raiding people and then enslaving them. Like, this is crazy.
Ships would be raided, often resulting in the massacre
they raiding each other's ships.
Of the survivors. Slavery under the Barbary pirates was brutal and marked by harsh conditions and limited rights for the slaves. They were often subject to physical abuse, including beatings and torture. The living conditions for the slaves varied depending on their roles and their treatment by their owners, ranging from relatively comfortable households to working in harsh and overcrowded ships. Male slaves captured by the Barbary pirates were forced into hard labor. Many of them would work in agriculture, construction, or mining activities. They were subjected to long working hours, often performing back-breaking tasks under harsh conditions. Physical abuse and punishment were common, and slaves were frequently deprived of basic rights and freedoms. Able-bodied men and older boys were frequently assigned to serve on the Barbary pirate ships. Slaves endured extremely grueling conditions, rowing for hours on end in cramped and overcrowded spaces. They were often subjected to brutal treatment, cruel discipline including whippings and beatings. Female slaves were usually assigned to domestic servitude. They served in households or harems, or as concubines to wealthy North African families. Their duties included cleaning, cooking, childcare, and other household tasks. While their conditions were generally better than that of the male slaves, they still faced numerous challenges and vulnerabilities, including exploitation and abuse. Enslaved individuals occupied the lowest part of the societal hierarchy and were considered more property than humans. They would be completely dependent on their owners for their well-being and were often subjected to arbitrary control and mistreatment. It is estimated that this slave trade of mainly white people resulted in the capture and enslavement of some 1 to 1.5 million people. Now that's wild. Schoolboy numbers when compared to what comes next though. Now, forget about the Barbary slave trade. The Ottoman Empire was also going crazy within Africa with the trans-Saharan slave trade, also known as the Arab slave trade of Africans. This slave trade predates the transatlantic slave trade and was even being practiced in ancient times. Fueled by several factors including economic, cultural, and religious motivations, Arab traders would source African slaves from parts of modern-day West, East, and Central Africa. The trade routes of the Arab slave trade were diverse and interconnected. The primary routes included, as the name suggests, the trans-Saharan trade route. This involved the transportation of slaves across the Sahara Desert to North Africa and the Middle East.
All right, so let's try to understand this. First things first, we're gonna look up what is a slave trade. Okay. Is a practice or business of capturing, transporting, buying, and selling slave people as property for profit. What he said? What did he say? Like a route or something? Is that what he was saying? A route. I'm talking about the route though. He said something about a route, like the slave.
Involved the transport.
Oh yeah, trade routes. That's what's called. Trade routes. So let's look what that is. So that's how they would get from country to country and try to path used to forcibly transport enslaved people from one location to another. Most notably, the transatlantic slave trade route, often referred to as a triangular trade. This system involved multiple journeys connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas to facilitate the capture, sale, and exploitation of millions of Africans for labor. Wow, bro. This is insane. Countless local and regional slave trades in Europe, Africa, and the Americas combined and created translate an ever-evolving system of people, ships, and goods that deported at least 12.5 million Africans toward destinations in Europe and the Americas over a period of 366 years. Jesus Christ, bro. Forced migration of African captives rely upon three complex intertwined systems that married the interests of European and American investors, traders, and planters with those of African merchants and leaders. Investors in such port cities as Bristol, Nantes, and Salvador da Bahia established Atlantic circuits along which their vessels they call them vessels? What? Their vessels could obtain captive laborers to supply commercial plantations, mines, or factories in the Americas. A second and equally complex system created by African traders and leaders moved captives from nearly all regions of the African interior to coastal markets, where the two systems tragically merged and gave life to one another.
Transportation of slaves included, as the name suggests, the trans-Saharan trade route. This involved the transportation of slaves across the Sahara Desert to North Africa and the Middle East. It was a long and treacherous journey that involved caravans traversing vast desert landscapes. There was also the East African Swahili coast route, where Arab traders established trading posts and settlements along the East African coast. From these coastal hubs, slaves would be transported to various destinations in the Arabian Peninsula, Persia, and the Indian Ocean region. African individuals were captured by raids, warfare, and kidnapping. Slave traders often formed alliances with African kingdoms and tribes to facilitate the capture and supply of slaves. Some African rulers actively participated in the slave trade, while others would resist and attempt to protect their population. African captives were then subjected to long and perilous journeys to slave markets or coastal ports, where they were sold to Arab traders. The captives would endure harsh conditions, forced marches, physical abuse, and a high mortality rate during the journey. The treatment and condition of African slaves would depend on the specific circumstances and attitudes of individual slave owners. However, many endured harsh and oppressive conditions. African slaves were often subjected to physical abuse, including beatings and torture. Sexual exploitation was also common, particularly for female slaves who were used as concubines. Again, slaves would be used for various forms of labor, including agricultural work, mining, construction, and domestic chores. They worked under harsh conditions, long hours, with minimal rest. Overall, the Arab slave trade of Africans was a vast and devastating system that involved the capture, transportation, and enslavement of millions of Africans. It is estimated that between 6 to 10 million Africans were enslaved under this system, with estimates going as high as 18 million. Now, this compares in scale to the transatlantic slave trade, where estimates are around 10 to 12 million Africans being enslaved. Now, you mean to tell me that the Arab slave trade took place over a longer period of time and also enslaved millions of Africans? Wait, why don't we learn about this? The last uncomfortable truth is the fact that Britain was critical in ending the transatlantic slave trade. So you mean to tell me that this nation or empire that's so synonymous with the profiteering of the transatlantic slave trade or the exploitation of colonialism was one of the first to say, well, maybe this is wrong and maybe we should take action to end it? The intellectual foundations of the opposition to slavery are rooted in the humanism movement of the Enlightenment. In the late 18th century, voices opposing slavery began to emerge in Britain. Influential figures such as William Wilberforce, Granville Sharp, and Thomas Clarkson played a pivotal role in raising awareness and advocating for the abolishment of the slave trade and of slavery itself. They formed the Committee for the Abolition of the Slave Trade in 1787, which became a driving force behind the movement. In 1807, the British Parliament passed the Abolition of the Slave Trade Act, making the transatlantic slave trade illegal throughout the British Empire.
There we
Act
go.
prohibited British ships from engaging in the slave trade, and the Royal Navy was deployed to intercept slave ships and enforce the law. Britain actively promoted the abolition of slavery internationally. Britain used its political and economic influence to pressure other nations to abolish slavery, and it signed treaties with various countries to enforce anti-slavery measures. The British Empire's anti-slavery policies had a significant impact on global attitudes and contributed to the decline of the slave trade. So you mean to tell me
Britain ended slavery? Why am I just not hearing about this? You know, in America, when they try to teach you about slavery, all right, especially as a black person, in the history books, they don't just directly say it, but this is what they're implying. All right? They are implying that white people are better than black people. Hence why white people just took advantage of them and made them their little slaves. You know? So it just goes on and on about how this white man enslaved them, and this black person couldn't do anything because the white man was so superior. That's like the propaganda they spread in America. You know what I'm saying? And we seen about in Germany how they understand that Adolf Mustache was a terrible person. They understand that. All right? They accept it. And they embrace it as a country to never do anything like that again. Right? They openly talk about it and everything. But America, they still hiding it. They're still low-key still racist. Like low-key. Really high-key. You know what I'm saying? So it's you see how America could do the right thing and embrace that. Yeah, they fucked up. You know, they took it too far for too long. They could embrace that, right? But no, they still really going full throttle with it. I really feel like what happened is it got to a point where it was too late in the game to still be trying to enslave people. Like they was doing it for so long that it had to be abolished at some point in time. You know what I'm saying? Nobody else in the whole world is enslaving people, but y'all still is. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So obviously it's gonna be a point in time where it's gonna end up stopping, right? So what they said was, all right, well, if we can't literally enslave these people, then we're going to enslave everyone, right? We're going to enslave everybody in our country. Everybody. All right, we don't even care about specific race anymore, bro. We want to control everyone's pockets. We want to control every single thing they do, everything, right? And then they created the 40-hour work week. And then from there, you're still enslaved. All right, you're still in debt. You're enslaved to the government now. So instead of them actually telling you what to do and forcing you to do it, now they're going to indirectly do it. You feel me? So that's where I feel like we are right now as the economy, America. And it's only getting worse. Like, it's not getting better. You would think it'd get better over time? No.
Had various countries to enforce anti-slavery measures. The British Empire's anti-slavery policies had a significant impact on global attitudes and contributed to the decline of the slave trade and slavery worldwide. Following the abolition of the slave trade, efforts shifted towards the emancipation of enslaved individuals. The Slavery Abolition Act
Proclamation
of 1833, introduced by Lord Stanley and later passed by Parliament, abolished slavery throughout the British Empire. This bolstered efforts for the gradual emancipation of enslaved people, with enslaved individuals over the age of 6 transitioning to an apprenticeship system before gaining full freedom. The act also included provisions for compensation of slaveholders, which led to controversy and debates over reparations that are still going on till this day. And that brings us to the end. Which of these uncomfortable truths do you think?
Man, bro, I can't even believe this, bro. Let me know in the comments if y'all want more videos like this. Hit the like button, hit that sub button. I love y'all. We go.